numbers are always in the form a plus bi. A is the real part. Okay, A is what we call the real part, and that is going to, we can actually graph these, but we don't graph them on the XY axis, we graph them on the real and imaginary axis. So A comes first, that's the real part. It's just the plain number, okay? X comes first, so the real axis is in the same place as the x-axis. B is what we call, that goes with the I, that's what we call the imaginary part. And we graph that part on the imaginary axis, which is in the place of the y-axis. Okay, so X comes first, the real part comes first, so the x-axis is the same place as the real axis. Y comes second, the imaginary part comes second, so the y-axis and the imaginary axis are kind of the same thing. Okay, so if we have the complex number -4 minus I, and we're wanting to graph that on the real and imaginary axis, we need to go left 4, because that's the real part, -4 is the real part, so we go left 4, and then we've got to go up or down. Well, there's nothing in front of our I except a minus, so what is that understood to be? -1, right? -1. So -4, left 4, down 1, that is the graph of the complex number -4 minus I. Left 4, down 1. Just like we would graph a regular XY point, real part first, imaginary part second. So, another example, 2 minus 5I. The real part is positive, so we move right 2. The imaginary part is -5, so we go down 5. And that is the complex number 2 minus 5I. And one more for good measure, if we just have the imaginary part, 3I, then the real part is 0. We don't move left or right, we just go up 3 units. That is the complex number 3I. Okay, so pretty simple concept. That's what I was looking for. You just got to remember, real comes first, so it's like your x-axis. Imaginary comes second, so it's like your y-axis. We can also do some operations with complex numbers, and they're very simple. Okay, they're very simple. We pretty much just treat the I like a variable. We just treat it like it's an x. So if we've got to subtract these two complex numbers, -5 minus 6I minus 1 plus 2I, we do it like we would do it if those i's were variables. We combine the real parts. -5 minus 1 is -6. And we combine the imaginary parts, -6, but don't forget, you still got to subtract. -6I minus 2I is -8I. That's all you have to do. Looks complicated, but it's that simple. Now, if that minus sign turns into multiplication, we still treat it just like it was a variable. If those i's were x's, what would we do in this case? How do we multiply that out? If those i's were x's, how would we multiply that out? Would we multiply just the 3 and the -2 and the 4i and 3i? We've got to FOIL or double distribute or use the box or whatever you've been taught. It's still 2 terms times 2 terms, so you got to multiply it out that way. It's a binomial times a binomial. So we need to FOIL. 3 times -2 is -6. 3 times -3i. You treat it just like it's a variable, so it's just -9i. Inside, -4i times -2 is +8i. And the last, -4 times -3 is +12. I times I is I squared. Now, I need to give you another piece of information. The other day, I told you that I was equal to the square root of -1. Well, if I is equal to the square root of -1, what happens if we square that? What's I squared equal to? Be careful. We're squaring the square root. It's just -1. Okay, if you square a square root, the square and the square root cancel each other out. You just have what's under the square root. Okay, so I squared is equal to -1. So we're going to replace I squared over here with -1. So we've got -6. I'm going to go ahead and put those, the -9i and the 8i together. So we've just got -1i plus 12 times, I replace I squared with -1. So then I have something else that I can combine. I've got -6 plus -12. So that ends up giving me -18 minus I. Now, y'all need to know how to do this by hand, but you can check yourself on the calculator. Okay? You just have to make sure everybody right now needs to go to mode on your calculator. Some of them will already have been changed because I just did this in first period. But I don't have as many people in first period as I do in second period. Okay? If you look at the next to the last line down there, you'll see real, and then beside that, A plus BI. That's what we've been dealing with. You need to put your calculator in complex mode if it's not already in there. So move over there, press enter, A plus BI should be flashing. It will stay in that mode. It will not mess anything up. It will not mess anything up. It will stay in that mode until you reset your calculator. I know some of you are in the habit of resetting it to clear it, so you'll have to put it back in complex mode if you did that. But you can just type this in, just how it looks. Remember, the I is second decimal, and you type it in with parentheses and everything, and press enter, and ta-da, there's the answer. Okay. Now, life will come to a point where y'all do have to do this without a calculator, especially at the honors level, so that's why I showed it to you. But you can check it. Your calculator will do it for you. And it'll also add and subtract. You just type in the problem exactly how it shows up, and it'll give you the answer with the I and everything. Okay? So that's the last thing that we needed to